Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the first Friday of the Maymester and the official halfway point as well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the screen reader experience and also kind of step back and ask some big picture questions about design. So the goals here are to interrogate how technology reflects assumptions about bodies and ability and how to push beyond a technology fixes disability mindset. So we're asking who is being imagined in design and who is being left out. Here we are kind of asking a fundamental question. Who do we design for? And often disability is understood as a deviation from quote unquote the normal or something to fix. But what if the problem isn't the body? But the design that doesn't account for that. So, we're thinking about how technology reflects assumptions about who we are and about what disability is or isn't. Again, we have this kind of duality, where disability is often just framed as located in the individual, right? The deficit or medical model, as opposed to disability being the effects of, societal norms or expectations, individual attitudes. And so um, the ways in which we make things reflect these assumptions and then also reflect who is imagined as the user in design decisions. I happen to be very short and it's hard for me to find clothes to fit. It's hard for me to fit into a car without some sort of adaptation. I have a friend who is very, very tall, and he has the same issues just on the other end of the spectrum. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was signed into law in 1990, tried to change the script that we have about this. If somebody can't access a building, it's the building that's broken, not the person. But in practice, design still tends to center a normal user. A ramp might meet a legal environment, excuse me, a ramp might meet a legal requirement, but that doesn't mean the space is welcoming, intuitive, or usable. For example, if you think about where is the accessible entrance to a place, is it the main entrance? Does a person using the accessible entrance have the same experience of entering a space as a user who can go into any other entrance? When I had my first faculty job at NC State, the College of Education was located in a building that was built in the early 1970s. And, um, you had to go upstairs to go in the main entryway. When you got there, you were in this kind of grand atrium with banners welcoming you. The accessible entrance, was located at the loading dock where you had to go in and go by, kind of through a dark alley and past these big dumpsters. And then you went into basically what was the basement. It was perfectly accessible, met the letter of the law, but it was certainly not an equitable experience. So, Bashir's documentary Fixed, I was to mention, challenges techno-optimism that we could or can or should use technology to fix disability. And the mindset reinforces ableist norms rather than valuing diverse ways of being and performs us to conform to narrow expectations. Some of you have already mentioned the example of the Black Hawk helicopter. The cockpit of the Black Hawk was designed to fit 90% of Army pilots, but when that was designed, it excluded most women and soldiers of color. Design standards can disguise structural exclusion as technical neutrality. This isn't just about disability, but it's also about race, gender, power, and belonging. I recently sat on a uh, kind of a capstone review committee for a student in architecture here at SU, and the student was reviewing actually the design guidelines for the ADA, and which lays out widths of doors and widths of bathroom stalls. And the student was observing that those were based on standardized measures that were done, I think, in the early 1960s And those measures themselves were um, drawn from active service Army soldiers who at that time would have all been men and who 60 years ago now would have had different um, heights and weights kind of on the average that the typical American does now. So design choices aren't neutral. They either extend or restrict participation. And too often, design assumes sameness and normalcy rather than planning for variation. Universal design does aim to shift that, but even universal design can fall short if it's just about ramps or screen readers and not about systematic inclusion. So assistive technology can be empowering, right? But it also places responsibility on the user to adapt. This is kind of, to be honest, part of the evil rationale behind the screen reader assignment. Instead of asking disabled people to work harder, we maybe should be designing systems that work better. And again, access shouldn't be retrofitted. It shouldn't be an aftershot, it thought. It shouldn't be something that's done after a building is built, after a tool is made, after a car is produced, but it should be baked in from the beginning. Built-in computer settings can go a long way. And these, quite honestly, are getting better every year, which is great. Um, but there are still gaps. Um, Keyboard shortcuts, text to speech, screen magnifiers, and sticky keys are all examples of flexibility in use. They support users with varied sensory, motor, and cognitive needs. Both Windows and Mac have expanded accessibility tools. And if you've gotten a new computer recently, you should have, like when you turned it on, had the option to turn those things on. I know both Windows and Mac. Actually, Mac, I think, Macintosh operating system starts by default having the screen reader on, and you have to turn it off. And I just haven't set up a Windows machine recently enough to remember if that's the case or not. Windows has ease of use, excuse me, the ease of access center. Mac has universal access. These tools support users who are blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, or who have limited motor control. Um, so there is a lot of what folks need is already there. But we do need to know how to look, where to look, how to set it up, how to turn it on, and how to support people in using them. Chapter 7 and 8 also walk through many ways students can interact with computers beyond the standard mouse and keyboard, things like trackballs, joysticks, touchscreens, scanning systems, eye gaze systems, even Morse code, which I think that's getting a bit dated, all offer different ways in. The goal isn't to find a perfect tool, but in this kind of context, to match tools to needs. So again, returning and thinking about the screen reader assignment, these tools, TalkBack, VoiceOver, anybody you might be using Narrator if you're using like Windows Mobile, are powerful, and they are, but they also reveal how fragile access can be. So, keep thinking about what worked, what didn't, and who gets to decide what accessible means. Several of you have commented on how long tasks take. And I will tell you, I have known several very proficient blind screen reader users who can do a lot very quickly. They can read text very quickly, so fast that the unaccustomed user really can't understand how quickly the screen reader is reading, but it still can take longer to navigate through systems that were not designed to be used with a screen reader, not designed with any forethought to how a screen reader might read things. My father, who passed away about a year and a half ago, was blind, and sat many times with him, kind of going through um, issues that he would run into using VoiceOver. Now, he didn't have a chance, or excuse me, didn't have a choice to turn it off. It was use his phone with VoiceOver or not use it. And I think that it is worth noting that um, the iPhone and VoiceOver on iOS are huge, huge, important tools. Um, the iPhone is widely used by blind people in the US. Um, and it's pretty good, and it doesn't require bolting on another piece of technology, adding another piece of software. It's there, you turn it on, you use it. So again, in thinking about what you're learning from this experience, um, already folks are sharing how frustrating it is to try and use the screen reader and try to learn it. Part of why I have been kind of gently and subtly prodding folks to start early is that it does get easier as you start to learn. It's a different paradigm. And if you can spend some time every day, you'll start to realize, oh yeah, I've got to tap twice on the screen, which I can do anywhere to select something, right? Or to actually like click something. Um, you um, you start to get a more of a feel for how the gestures work and things like that. It's important. Things like clunkiness and and exhaustion are part of the everyday experience for disabled users. There's this whole concept of wear and tear and of what it takes for a person who uses assistive technology to get through the day. I have a friend who has an adapted van, um, which is great. It enables her to get to work without, relying on somebody to come pick her up. It enables her to have a, a huge degree of independence, but it's also harder to maintain that van. If something goes wrong with the van, it's not just a trip to the, Chrysler dealership to fix it. It's an adapted, I think, Chrysler minivan. Um, it involves many more steps. There's the um, company that did the conversion. There's the company that maybe does the programs the software that controls the adaptations in the van. Um, and recently she had an experience driving, and the whole system just blinked out, and she ran off the road, and fortunately was not injured and the damage was minor, but she ended up like running into a guardrail and then didn't have the van for 3 months because it wasn't just a quick trip to the body shop to get fixed. It was everything had to be taken apart, everything had to be sent off to be tested, everything had to be reinstalled. There were all these different moving parts and pieces that she had to navigate and stay up with that somebody else wouldn't have had to. So again, it is, it's just, part of the everyday experience. If you just think about like having a motorized wheelchair and having to make sure that it stays charged, it's not just an inconvenience, but it can mean getting stuck somewhere, getting stuck in the rain, not being able to go somewhere. So this isn't just about thinking about how to learning to use technology, but it's also thinking about how can technology be designed better. And again, I want to reiterate that I'm not expecting folks to be expert screen reader users. The fact of the matter is that unless you are only using a screen reader, it's the only way you can interact with your phone, you're probably not going to, develop a fair degree of proficiency. It's about kind of learning what's involved. It's not about learning what it means to be blind or what it is like to be blind, but rather what's involved with learning, teaching, and supporting these technologies. And so again, thinking about, things like what stuck out to you on the from the Miller and Gordon piece, the disabled by design. What's surprising you and frustrating you in the screen reader activity? And what do you see differently now about the relationship between design and access? So again, um, keep forging ahead on the screen reader assignment. Um, it is frustrating. It is by design, um, but that's also kind of part of what the experience is. Have a good weekend, and uh, feel free again, like I said, to email me or message me if you have any questions or concerns. I'm here to support you.